Welcome to the Vintage Times, a program for older persons. On our program today, we will talk about conversations we want to have with our children or other family members about life care issues for a time when we may not be able to make our own decisions. These conversations may include health care, housing, financing, end-of-life decisions, and more. These conversations may be difficult, but they're a good way for us to know that our children know our wishes and that our wishes will prevail. Today we will talk to two experts. With me is Martha Kern and Holly Zaborowski. They both work for Lifecare Innovations. And thank you both for joining us today. And Martha, can we begin with you? Can you describe Lifecare Innovations to us?
Yeah, we are a company based in Burr Ridge. We're owned and founded by a nurse, and we have a large clinical professional staff, including Holly, a lot of social workers, and we work with individuals who, for one reason or another, cannot quite manage day-to-day life on their own. It might be because they have age-related or medical issues. It might be because they're even younger and have psychiatric problems or developmental disabilities.
Yeah, so you help with whatever needs they may have.
Correct.
Right. And Holly, can you describe your actual plan that you have for older people?
Yes, so Martha mentioned a wide variety of demographics that we serve, and because all of our clients are different, we begin with a comprehensive assessment to help identify what the particular client's needs might be, and then we employ a model that we call surround care, and that model was developed by our organization and basically describes a situation where we are circling the client with all of the services that they need to help them maintain their independence. So for example, if we have an elderly woman who's living on her own, she might want to retain her residence but isn't really managing there well. We might provide her with a caregiver to come in as needed to assist her with various things. We might decide that she's having trouble getting to her doctor's appointments, and that once she's at her doctor's appointments, she's really unable to receive the information and then act on it. Or we might provide her with a social worker to accompany her to those appointments and really help her apply the information. Oftentimes older people have older homes, and those homes are in need of repair, right, as any homeowner would know.
Right.
We have a property management team that can come in and provide those services as needed, and that often helps a lot of our older clients feel comfortable, right, because they're seeing the same group of folks each time, and after a while they gain some trust and it's not as problematic for them to report a leaky sink.
Of course. What a comfort, a big comfort, because I just may not be able to make these decisions for myself. You're the experts. So then it is also important to convey our feelings, our decisions to our children. Can you address that, Holly? How important is it?
It's very important. I'm a former hospital social worker, and oftentimes I would meet with the adult children of elderly parents who now are in the hospital and for whatever reason are unable to communicate what their wishes were, right, about their medical care. And the children and the relatives of those patients were very distraught. Listening to the doctor advise them that they now need to direct their loved one's care because the patient is not able. Some people are comfortable with that, but many people are not.
Right.
And so having a conversation in advance of an illness or a crisis is really the best way to make sure that everyone in the family understands what a person's wishes are about their health care.
So what would you advise? What do we need to discuss? What specifically do we need to tell our children in advance?
Well, everyone has different wishes about the kind of care that they're going to receive. You might be of a particular religion that doesn't allow for some sorts of care. You might just have some moral beliefs that kind of dictate how you feel about the care that you might receive at the end of your life. And so it's very important to have a conversation with your children about the specifics of what you would or would not want to have done for you. You would want to be specific about whether or not you would want a feeding tube if you were unable to eat on your own. You would want to be specific about whether or not you would want a breathing machine if you were unable to breathe on your own. You might even have a conversation about your interest in donating vital organs if that was something that was important to you. These are difficult conversations to have, but it is so much more difficult not to have them. And if you can think about it in the frame of mind that you're really saving your children or your grandchildren the pain that they will suffer having to make these decisions on your behalf, that's a good motivator to begin these conversations.
And comforting. Holly, does it have to be end-of-life decisions, or can it also be that I temporarily cannot talk or cannot make a decision?
It doesn't have to be just end-of-life decisions. You might suffer a stroke that you would recover from in 2 or 3 months, but while you're debilitated, you're unable to speak about what your wishes would be. And so you can kind of walk through scenarios with your family too. If this were to happen, this would be what I want. You might be planful enough to say, if I ever needed a rehabilitation stay, this is the facility I'd be most interested in. Maybe you visited a friend at a facility and you really liked it, or maybe you didn't like one. Those are important conversations to have as well.
Martha, is it important to talk to our children about paperwork, where we keep it, passwords, these
Most
kinds
definitely,
of things?
yes, because sometimes it's our paperwork will reveal where our finances might be. Bills need to be paid even when we're incapacitated. My mother had a surgery years ago. She was very ill. It was very sudden, and I wasn't on the checkbook, and her creditors were very much wanting to be paid. So here I was at the bedside putting the pen in her hand and having her sign checks, and it's a very difficult situation. You need to be able to transfer money into that checking account possibly, so you kind of need to know where things are, and understandably adult children are reluctant to say, well, Mom or Dad, tell us where the money is. It doesn't sound like a proper question to ask of your parents, but it is important to know.
So in advance you tell them, I made a list, or I have a drawer, or I have a safe deposit box where you can find information.
And you want to keep that current. A lot of people will keep the most recent statement for every one of their accounts in a folder all together. And all you have to do is tell your family members where they can find that folder. And each month when you get a new statement, you take out the old one, you put in the new one, and then it's current, and that's a nice reminder, oh, if I've closed this account, I'm going to take this out.
What about the safe deposit box? Does someone need the key in addition to myself?
It's good. It's a good idea to have an extra key, and also to have a loved one become a signer on the card they keep at the bank. We had a gentleman, we were hired because he passed away on his own. He didn't have family members. and we found a safe deposit box key in his home, and that happened to be where all of his important documents were, directing how he wanted things to go. And it took a long time. No one else was on the card, so the trust company that was managing this had to go to court and get an order and gain access to the box that way.
Yeah. It really is a big comfort to do this all in advance. It's a relief to know that my children know where it all is and what my wishes are.
Right.
Yeah. So, Holly, can you describe some important documents we should execute while we're well?
It's very important to have a power of attorney for health care in place, and also a power of attorney for property.
Okay.
And those agents that are assigned do not have to be the same for both.
Okay.
You might have a son that's a power of attorney for health care, and a daughter that's a power of attorney for property.
That's good.
Sometimes you might have an only child that's the power of attorney for both. But either way, it's important to assign someone the ability to act on your behalf if you are unable, both in a capacity to be able to make healthcare decisions, and also in the capacity to be able to carry on the financial obligations that you have when you're not well. Within these documents, you can assign a successor agent. So in a family of multiple children, you might see a power of attorney that lists Jane as the primary and Bob as the secondary, and so on and so forth. So that if Jane is unable to act, then it's already decided that Bob's going to step in.
Okay.
There's another document called the 5 Wishes. That's correct. And that document allows a person to walk through the various choices that folks normally have to make at the end of their life. It's a very good guide, and it asks a lot of really insightful questions that can get a conversation going.
Okay. We have the 5 wishes at the township. We'll give you our number later. You can call or come in to get it. I also want to mention a file of life that we have, which is really very, very important. It's a form that you complete with your vital information for when the paramedics come. They can look at the form and they know what your healthcare needs are, who your doctor is, and all kinds of vital information. It fits magnetically on your refrigerator. All our first responders are trained to look on the refrigerator. They then take it with them to the hospital, who again is asking you many questions you may not be able to answer because you're not feeling well. There's also a card to put in your wallet or purse. We have those at the township also. Martha.
Yes.
How do I start a conversation with my children? It's one thing to know I should do it. It's another to actually find a good time to do it.
Well, it's a good idea to speak to everyone when they're together, if possible. You know, often that's going to be a holiday celebration, and the last thing you want to do is say, by the way, if I'm incapacitated, here's what I want.
Right.
But it is important that everybody hear the same truth at the same time, so there are no disagreements later about what mom wanted or what mom said. And that also affords an opportunity for everyone to ask questions and speak up about how they might feel about your choices. You may feel that, you know, if something happens and you don't want to even have a funeral because it would be a burden on them, they may say, well, it will help us feel better and gain some closure. So you might even gain an insight about how your wishes affect those who will
Right.
survive you or care for you when you are debilitated.
Yeah, very, very important. Or maybe one child really cannot take that responsibility and they may say, Mom, give it to someone else. I can't do it. Right?
We encourage people to not only appoint agents under the power of attorney, and they should see an attorney to get that done, but they need to convey to their agents what they want so that in that moment of need, there's no agonizing over a decision. All I have to do is carry out
Right.
the wishes that I already know you have, which is a relief for me.
Right.
It's a relief for your children not to wonder. And it's also important when you've named an agent to tell them you've named them, so they have an opportunity to say, oh, I don't think that's something I'd want to do. I wouldn't really feel comfortable about it. You'd be surprised how often a person gets a phone call when there's an emergency and only then learn that they're the power of attorney for someone that they may not know that well.
Now, if you have several children and you don't want to hurt their feelings, how do you decide who you name as an agent?
Well, that varies from family to family. If you have a nurse or a social worker in the family, I'll bet Holly has been named power of attorney for healthcare more than once within her family because she has an expertise in that area. And if you have someone who's always been very good with finances and property and decisions like that, it might be a kind of easy and natural decision.
So, in a way, you allocate by expertise and you make sure that each child has a responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's also important to consider geographical location. You can, in today's technological age, very easily manage a person's finances from afar, but it's much more difficult to manage someone's health care. If you are living in the Chicagoland area and your daughter lives in Texas and she's been appointed your power of attorney for health care, that's going to be very difficult for your daughter to manage very effectively.
Right.
In some situations like that, our organization has been contacted to kind of be the person on the ground where mom is. But a lot of times people are having to kind of put their lives on hold for a bit and travel to where mom or dad are. So that's an important piece to keep in mind as well.
And then you want to be sure to communicate to all of them what you wish for them to do. So they all know and they all agree and no bad feelings, hopefully.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say that conversation is just as important as the legal documents that everyone's filling out.
Right, having conversations.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, you can't possibly imagine in advance every scenario.
Right.
But usually there's kind of a guiding philosophy where if the doctor feels that I have a good chance to recover and have a good quality of life, I don't mind if you engage in what they might call heroic measures. But if at this point where the doctor says, well, I'm not going to recover and I may never walk again and I may be in a skilled nursing facility, at that point I want you to withdraw heroic measures and don't feel bad about it. This is what I want.
Yeah, that's important because it's difficult for the children or spouse, whoever, to make decisions unless they know that's what mom really wanted.
Absolutely.
Mom's wishes prevail. Now, what if it is difficult for me to have a conversation? I just can't do it. What do you advise?
Well, we sometimes encourage people to write it all down. And you can make copies of this document and send it to all of your children. You might put it in a packet in your home for them to find when you're in the hospital or otherwise not available. And everything, it's right there in writing. You can be very concise. There's not a lot of emotion about it. You might even encourage them not to spend a lot of money on funeral and burial things if that's not important to you, because people feel aggrieved and guilty.
Yeah.
And sometimes they feel a little better if they get a really expensive casket for mom, when in fact you'd rather that money go toward your grandchildren's graduation fund or their college fund or whatever the case might be. You can relieve them of any guilt associated with certain decisions by letting them know how you feel and that it really is okay and it really is what you want.
It's so important. And you mentioned filming my feelings, so that this is a good way you can actually see me say these things and there's no disagreement. Is that right?
You can have your wishes videotaped or audio taped if you're not comfortable writing. Any way that you personally can convey to your family what your wishes are going to make most certain that your wishes are carried out, and it's going to put your family at ease when they're making those decisions on your behalf.
Martha, you mentioned before that in this technological age, so much is on the computer, on the internet, and we have passwords, more than one password. How important is it nowadays to tell our family what our password is or where it is?
That is very important, and there have been some very notable legal squabbles in recent years when a person has kept all of their finances and their information in an email account, or their statements are sent to them by email. They become debilitated, they're not able to speak, or they pass away, and the family says to the internet provider, "We need you to let us into this email box so we can gather this information," and the provider says, "Well, I'm sorry, you can't do that." So there have been some important conversations about how are we going to manage this. Can you have a beneficiary on your email account?
Oh.
I think that's something that the future will bring, where someone can then inherit that ability, just like you inherit the ability to write a check or get into a safe deposit box. I am the beneficiary, I am the named designee who can access this or have the password sent to me and find all the banking online that my mother's been doing, or the investment statements that are coming to accounts I may not have even known about.
So important. Now, what I would like to ask you, because it always speaks the loudest, can you give us some good examples of cases that you've had where you've helped older people?
I am working, or have worked in the past, with a family that had a mother and a father here in the Chicagoland area, and also an elderly son, a disabled son rather. And so all three of these folks were not doing well, and the family member who was well and was able-bodied lived out of state. And it was very difficult for him to manage the care of his mother, his father, and his brother at the same time from afar. They all had properties, they all had their own health care needs, and he had a life of his own in a different state. So he engaged our organization, and we acted on his behalf here in the Chicagoland area. And we were able to help him make certain that his family was well cared for, make certain that his family had what they needed, and allow him to continue the life that he had in the state that he had chosen to live in. That gave him peace of mind. And when his father and his brother passed, we were able to help bring his mother to him. And that was a wonderful thing for both mom and son. And we were very pleased to be able to provide that service.
Of course. and they were pleased to have you, to see the same person. Help me navigate. What types of things did you help him with?
Navigate is such a good word. All three family members had their own separate and different medical issues that needed to be addressed. So we helped the son out of state understand what his mother, his father, and his brother's issues were, what medical providers were kind of the experts in their area, and working with him, we set up care with those individuals, and then we followed through on the care. We took the mother, the father, and the son to all of their appointments, and we made sure that all of the care that they needed was provided.
That's wonderful. This is so very important and so comforting. Is there anything else of importance either one of you want to say?
Well, it may be some relief to let people know that once they have this conversation, they can go on kind of liberated, knowing that it's done and everybody's comfortable and everybody knows how you want things to go, and that there's really a very good chance that things will go exactly as you would like in the most important moments.
That's important. Holly, you want to add something?
I would just like to piggyback off of Martha and say, as uncomfortable as that conversation might be, it's so much more uncomfortable if you don't have the conversation.
Good point.
Yes,
Good
yes.
point. Thank you both very, very much for enlightening us on an important topic. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you learned how very important it is to plan ahead, discuss our plans with our children. This way we will be assured that our own wishes will prevail, and that our children will know what they are. So if you would like more help, you can call Holly or Martha at Lifecare Innovations at 630-953-2154, or you may call us at the Township at 630-719-6682. And thanks again for joining us today.